Coast to Coast Destiny today. Manifest Destiny. We're going west, young man. Alright? We're going cowboy and we're going west like America went west. We're going to talk about it. I mean, there were brave pioneers, and that's great to learn about that. That's great. And they suffered and built a new land. Unfortunately, they took that land from Native Americans. And unfortunately, everyone wasn't treated fairly, like the Asian Americans and the African Americans that were newly freed, a lot of them, from after the Civil War. But we'll get all into everything. But right now, it's the coast-to-coast destiny, how America moved west. All right, so we're ready to learn about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, let's go.
Woohoo.
All right. President James K. Polk wanted California and Oregon, and so did most other Americans. The land was enticing. It was something that convinced people that it was right to take it. It was an idea called manifest destiny. Those highfalutin words were first used by a newspaper reporter. He said it was the manifest destiny of the United States to fill the land from coast to coast. Connor, lean back. You're probably right in the voice range here. Thank you. Polk believed that America had the right and duty to spread democracy across the continent. Most Americans agreed with him. Soon that phrase, manifest destiny, was on everyone's tongue. Both Great Britain and the United States claimed Oregon. In 1846, when President Polk signed a treaty with England, it settled the Oregon problem. The two nations agreed to split the Oregon Territory on the 49th parallel. That was the 49th line of latitude, counting up from the equator. England got the land north of the parallel, the United States the land to the south. That U.S. land today is Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and parts of Montana, and Wyoming. The English land is Western Canada. California belonged to Mexico. People in the United States didn't know much about the West Coast. Then Richard Henry Dana, who had been to California on a sailing ship, wrote his adventures in a book called 2 Years Before the Mast. That's a good book. I've read it. It was published in 1840. It was a good reading. Yeah, I agree. President Polk and other Americans became excited about California. Dana had been surprised by the Californians, by their good manners and their fine clothes. They spoke Spanish. They were as elegant as old Spain, and they lived with the ease that seems to come naturally in a sunny climate. Next to the love of dress, I was most struck with the fineness of their voices. Every common ruffian-looking fellow appeared to me to be speaking elegant Spanish. It was a pleasure simply to listen to the sound of the language. The common bullock driver on horseback delivering a message seemed to speak like an ambassador at a royal audience. The Californians didn't appear to have money, as people did in the East. Instead, they used silver or cattle hides. I certainly never saw so much silver at one time as during the week that we were at Monterey, wrote Dana. The hides they bring down dried and double, and clumsy ox carts or upon mules' backs. Sailors called the hides California banknotes. But what about the Native Americans? Dana made it clear that they had lost control of their land. How did it happen? Indians had lived in California for thousands of years, cut off from the rest of the world. Then, after Magellan found a way to sail around South America, explorers and ships made occasional visits. Juan Caribio went there, and so did Francis Drake. The explorers didn't stay, but they did leave their germs. And those germs killed a lot of Indians. Most of the California natives were wiped out. In 1769, about the time Tom Paine and Patrick Henry were stirring things up on the other side of the continent, the Spanish government sent a few priests and soldiers to California. Spain didn't seem really interested in the place, but it looked like as if the Russians might be thinking about moving in. Spain didn't like that idea. The priests built Catholic missions along the coast. The missions were agricultural settlements with lovely gardens and churches, where Indians were taught about Christianity and made to do all the hard work of farming and building. We actually, if you remember, studied that earlier in the year. The priests believed that they were serving God by baptizing and teaching the Native Americans. They planned one day to give the missions to the Indians. Some of those missions were very prosperous. The mission San Gabriel had 150,000 cattle, 20,000 horses, and 40,000 sheep, along with orchards, a distillery, looms, and more. Some of the Spanish settlers were convicts sent to California to get them out of Spain or Mexico. The English did the same things and sent many of their prisoners to their colonies. When Mexico won its independence from Spain in 1821, Mexicans became rulers of California. Spain no longer controlled the missions. The mission land, which had been intended for the Indians, was taken by Mexican Californians, who turned most of it into huge cattle ranches. The Native Americans became the workers on those ranches. They were almost like slaves. The Indians, Dana wrote, do all the hard work, but for the rancheros, the owners of the big ranches, life seemed mighty good. Dana described it. Here as dogs and chickens elsewhere. There are no stables to keep them in, but they are allowed to run wild and graze wherever they please, being branded and having long leather ropes called lassos attached to their necks. The men usually catch one in the morning, throw a saddle and bridle upon them, and use them for the day. Let them go at night, catching another the next day. When they go on long journeys, they ride one horse down and catch another, throw the saddle and bridle upon him, and after riding him down, take a third, and so on to the end of their journey. There are probably no better riders in the world. Since Mexico was having problems at home, it had 30 presidents in its first 50 years of independence. That's a lot of presidents. California was left on its own, which is, well, the way the most Spanish-speaking Californians wanted it anyway. There weren't many of them, perhaps 6,000 by 1840. No one knows how many Indians there were, but it was a lot more than that. Of others, Europeans, including Russians, Americans, Asians, there were about 400 now. One of the most interesting of the Europeans was a Swiss, John Augustus Sutter. He had become a Mexican citizen, acquired a huge land grant, and built a fort plantation inside walls of adobe. Sutter's fort was like a little kingdom, where crops were grown, clothing made, horses raised, and soldiers trained. Sutter was unusually generous to visitors, to the Indians who worked for him, to almost everyone. If you needed a meal or a bed for the night, or some help or friendly advice, you could count on John Sutter. Many people did. Especially those who become overland from other countries, the United States, to settle. Richard Henry Dana thought they were just what California needed. To Dana, who was a serious-minded New England Yankee, the Californians seemed lazy. It was only the character of the people, he said, that prevented California from becoming great. The soil is as rich as a man could wish, climate as good as any in the world, water abundant, and the situation extremely beautiful. In the hands of an enterprising people, what a country this might be. Of course, you know whom he had in mind when he mentioned enterprising people. Sure you do. The same people President Polk had in his mind. Americans. Between 1841 and 1848, a few thousand Americans made it over the mountains to the California valleys. They were enterprising people, but not everyone was happy to see them. We find ourselves suddenly threatened by hordes of Yankee immigrants, the Mexican governor wrote. They are cultivating farms, establishing vineyards, erecting mills, sorting up lumber, building workshops, and doing 1,000 things that seem natural to them. Remember, when they arrived in California, those Mexicans were foreigners in Mexican territory. The land they found was as nature had made it, spectacular. Near the coast, fields of yellow-orange poppies stretched farther than anyone could see. In the mountains, waterfalls dropped 1/3 of a mile and more, and trees grew taller than a 20-story building, although no building had yet been built that high. Prickly pear, primrose, and yucca blossomed in the desert. As I said, President Polk wanted California. California at the time meant more than today's West Coast state. It meant the land controlled by Mexico. And that included all or parts of the future states of New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, Colorado, and Wyoming, as well as California. President Polk sent a diplomat to Mexico City with an offer to buy that land. The Mexicans were insulted. They said they wouldn't sell, and certainly not to the United States. Not after what the United States had just done in Texas. You'll read about that in the next chapter tomorrow. All right. Have a good night. Do you think we got California?
No.
Oh, yes, we do.
I don't think so.
No?
I mean, you know, there's always room for a 50th state.
Yeah,
you know,
okay.
around there.
All right. Thank you for your sarcasm, my friend. All right. We'll see you later. Good night.
Good night.